this little eyeball every one of those?
I don't know. The eyeball isn't there anymore.
There we go. And here we are for another episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. I just finished my birthday celebratory weekend. I had a great time. I want to thank everybody who sent me birthday wishes, and I want to thank everybody who didn't, because it really doesn't matter. And honestly, it was just a hell of an experience. I had so much fun in so many ways, and I mean, everything has its ups and downs, and birthdays aren't meant to be any different. You know, it's really just a day after all. But in this case, it was very much a celebration, I think, in the way I have learned to live my life in terms of just not having any weight for the most part. Like, I really enjoy going from place to place and just kind of joking around, boosting people up, not taking things personally, not having any weight. Like, you've both hung out with me, and for the most part, when you're hanging out with me, you know, I'm not really going to go, oh, guys, I've been really down on myself lately. Like, I'm just not going to do that, because you got enough of your own shit to worry about, frankly, and I'm okay. Like, I know enough about myself to deal with that stuff. And so when we do the retreats, it's a little different, because we're making the offer to people like, hey, having problems, not having problems carrying your weight, but are you having problems remembering that you can?
Yeah.
And that it's not as heavy as you are thinking it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that we're helping to carry the weight. We're just saying, hey, we can chat with you while you remind yourself that, A, you are very strong.
Yeah.
And B, the weight isn't that big. Right? But for my birthday, and I said this during the birthday weekend, I don't want to have these conversations. Like, if you're going through some stuff and doing the up and down thing based on things that you're invested in, I don't want to deal with it. You know, and in fact, I very specifically said, I don't want to deal with it. And so I wanted to talk about this, because it was unfortunate. There was an unfortunate instance over the weekend, and hi, everyone. Not unfortunate, like, oh, I ruined my birthday or any of that shit. It was just one of those human things that just kind of was unfortunate. But throughout the podcast, I've always said, and I've been very, very specific about this, I do not want anybody looking at me as though I am not down in the fucking trenches.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm something other than a human being. Andrew certainly doesn't want that, and Amanda certainly doesn't want that. But it's not just, false modesty. It's not that. There's a consequence to looking to someone or something for a sense of fulfillment or validation or a sense of purpose, or even the next insight, even the next conversation that makes you feel better. Whatever it is you're looking for is causing you to go through a cycle. And unless you're willing to admit that, you will not recognize that cycle. And this is something that often happens. And you'll see it a lot of times in relationships where one person is very religious and the other person isn't. And I find it fascinating, because you have the one person who is looking to something for happiness.
Yep.
And as a result of that, going through the up and down cycle of frustration and disappointment, because nothing outside of you can ever make you happy. And the more you are looking to that thing to fulfill you and make you feel better, make you feel more valuable or more accepted or any of those things, the greater the fall when you realize that's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that cycle. And that cycle repeats over and over and over again, so long as that person is looking outside themselves for that validation, for that
each time.
Straight up. Okay, now, on your own, that is one thing to deal with. It really is. But in a codependent relationship, that up and down cycle gets justified by the other person and even ignored. They actually start to think that the ups and downs that they're going through along with this other person are theirs, because they're not looking at that person's need. They're not looking at that person looking outside of themselves, even beyond their partner, for some sense of happiness. They don't want to see that. That sucks. Mm-hmm. It sucks to see that your partner is self-absorbed and doesn't see you.
Yeah.
And so you don't see that. And instead, you go and follow along in the conversations of your partner. And that's the thing, is that your partner, unaware that they are still looking towards something for happiness and validation and all of that, is going through the ups and downs. And so their conversation is going through the ups and downs. If they're not happy, they complain about everything. Right? They play victim. They blame everyone. They avoid responsibility. They do all these things. They may not even know why, because they may not be willing to accept that they're looking outside themselves, because it hits the ego. It sounds terrible. And so their mood goes up and down, and the conversation goes up and down. And whether you like to admit it or not, as a partner to this person, hell, as somebody who's just spending a lot of time with that person, you feel that drag. You feel that drag, because where you may want to be lifting up the room around you or having a good time in yourself, they're making it look like they're just going through hell. And you don't want to lack empathy and say, well, you got to go through that on your own, especially if you're their partner. So you start to confuse basically enabling that behavior for empathy. You start to confuse being there for a self-toxic cycle as helping them, instead of just enabling that cycle. See, it's in those moments where the other partner should be able to be aware of what's happening enough to go, you're going through these ups and downs a lot. Do you think maybe you're looking for something? Because it is indicative that you are looking for something. That emotional spectrum of up and down, like super high as you're getting close to it, and then super low as it seems farther away, that is, and it does go part and parcel with that mentality of looking for something. If you're suffering, you're looking for something. And as the partner, it's your responsibility to go like, hey, is it such a big deal? And you could say, well, it's not my responsibility. And that's true. It's not. Go ahead and suffer with them.
Yeah. How's that going for you?
Because that's the point. And this is the danger of looking up to someone. And this is the reason that at retreats we have had moments where other people have been unhappy with me when I pull away from them, when I'm not giving them the response they like, when I don't engage with them. And it's, well, why? Well, because you're looking at me like I'm the answer to your problem. And how do I know that? Because it wouldn't bother you otherwise.
Exactly.
It wouldn't bother you otherwise. And so we've had this conversation numerous times. And I've always said, I'm just a human being. And again, I don't have infinite patience. There's been a number of people who've seen me finally get to the point where it's just like, I just don't want to fucking deal with your shit. I'm just done with your shit, right? Because I'm a human being, and that's so important. And so I guess that's why it was sad this week to see a relationship that I have been happy to be a part of and happy to put my time into basically come to an end because of an inability on one person's part to see me like a human being, despite numerous conversations, and an inability on the other person's part to recognize that their partner was doing that. And so that relationship had to come to an end. And you could say, well, that sounds really sad. But the fact is that it's sad and it's not. Because somebody pointed out, well, that must be really sad for you after several years of building this relationship with them. But on the flip side, after several years of building a relationship, I still had the problem on my birthday weekend. And so it's not about it being personal. It's about it just being a recognition. We're not doing each other any good. You don't want to talk to me. You just want me to play that role. And you don't want to hear me say anything outside of what's going to make you feel better about those roles. That's not a relationship. That's not a friendship. And it's so important, and I'm stressing this to the listener, to be honest about your relationships, because the more they're based on need, the more they're based on you just not wanting to be alone, the more they're based on familiarity, all of that stuff, the more you are blind. You really are. And you will maintain relationships that are ultimately just sucking the life out of you day in and day out, or at least every time that you're participating in that relationship, because it's not really honest, because it's not really genuine, because it's not really going anywhere. And then if those relationships are maintained long enough, you start to hear about the shit that's getting said behind your back by these people, right? But they won't say it to your face. And that gives you further indication. And so you could be hurt by that, or just go, yeah, because that's what a relationship that's falling apart does. It's harder to be honest with each other. It's harder to connect genuinely. It's harder, to tell that person or even hear from them the harder truths. And that's just it. Just wipe your hands of it and move on. It's not personal. And they will be fine.
Yep.
I will be fine. Everybody's going to be fine.
Mhm.
There was nothing about this outside of it being unfortunate that was really a serious detriment to anyone. And that's really important to remember. You're going to be okay. Relationships will end and new ones will begin. All they do is make space for other new experiences. Your relationships end as you continue to grow, depending on the relationships and whether those people are continuing to grow as well.
And that shift, the change. Love the rant, by the way.
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Solid 10 minutes there.
Oh, shit.
Impressive. Yeah, that might be a record for us.
That flew
But
by.
yeah, it was. But yeah, that sense of like giving space, like there oftentimes in relationships like that isn't the opportunity to change, to shift, if there isn't a shift made like that. As soon as it's attachment, if that person's not willing to take a look at where it's coming from, they're going to be trading a lot of their ability to just trust themselves and have faith in themselves for whatever they assume they're getting from that person. It's like, because they're looking for answers in them. They're looking for them to guide them or get them somewhere, as opposed to realizing that they are just as whole of a person as you are, and they have stuff that they go through as well. And so assuming that someone else, on top of all of the depths of the things that they have going on in their life, their responsibilities, their things, to assume that they owe you anything after that is ridiculous, is absurd. And that sense of need for someone to live a certain way, act a certain way, speak a certain way, validate your perception is going to get in the way, a lot of your life. It's going to create a lot of conflict. It's going to fill a lot of that space, in your mind about what should or shouldn't be happening, as opposed to just being able to let go of the thoughts about should and shouldn't, and be in the experience that you're having, and realize how little control there actually is and how unnecessary it is too, because it can be kind of alarming, kind of jarring to be like, wait, I can't actually do specific things to guarantee that I'm going to be happy, at peace, live a very fulfilled life, but it'll maintain this idea that it can be somewhere else if you're holding on to that. And if that's not the case, then you are left with yourself in the moment, in the experience that you're having, and are able to realize that you have influence over the reality that you're experiencing. You can respond in a multitude of ways to whatever is going on in the situation that you're in.
Mhm.
Like, there is the opportunity to do that. And so if you're assuming that not only there's another place, but another person, that like them, the words that they express, the things they share, how close or far you are from them helps you at all, it's just cutting down, like percentage by percentage, of your ability to have faith in yourself, to trust yourself, just you on your own, to trust just yourself by yourself, to make decisions and be who you are exactly as you are, and just be willing to not judge yourself as you go. You can't be trading any of that to anyone else, not a single person. It's not necessary and isn't going to do you any good when it comes to your moment to moment experiences, as opposed to this experience where you're trying to control everything. As long as everything stays the same, as long as everything remains exactly as it is, then I'll be okay. Like, don't you want to be able to jump into something new and not judge yourself every single moment, or at least be willing to recognize that like it's just you responding to the situation and everything else is an unknown? You don't know what's beyond this, what you got, where you're at, what you're doing, the moment you're experiencing, your response. That's it. That's the responsibility thing, that for so much of my life I assumed that responsibility was just having a plan and being responsible for just having some idea of knowing is responsible to have a 5-year plan, responsible to have a 10-year plan. You don't really have any guarantee beyond like literally the experience that you're having right now. Not even until the end of the day, you can have ideas of plans, but the moment to moment experience is still going to be totally unknown. And you trade that ability to respond and have, you know, influence in the sense of what you're doing, because the influence is happening one way or the other. But if you assume there's some control or someone else that can, you know, dictate your experience, you're going to be trading a lot. You're going to be trading a lot of that potential and a lot of that ability to jump into anything new and just trust yourself and have faith in yourself to, you know, follow your instincts.
I think it's a question I've been asking myself lately is just, you know, am I really so surprised that people aren't always going to love the Amanda experience? Right? Am I really going to assume that, like, I'm never going to bother someone, that I'm never going to rub them the wrong way, intentionally or not? Of course I will. But yet when we get that feedback from other people, it's like a shock. I'm clutching my metaphorical pearls. I have offended. I have crossed the line. I have done something that means someone doesn't view me as the be all end all, that somebody doesn't view me as being perfection or without flaws or always being pleasant and something that they always look forward to. Of course. Right. So it really shouldn't be such a shock when somebody's like, hey, not really loving that. And yet we take such offense when someone is just giving us honest feedback and not a criticism. It's not saying, hey, you've done something wrong. It's just saying, hey, what you're doing is not invisible. Just wanted you to know that because I'm experiencing this moment with you. And so how you show up is a part of that experience that I am both feeling and creating with you. So if I'm telling you, hey, is everything okay? You know, it looks like something's on your mind because you're not really here. We can feel that, you know, and I give examples like, you know, when they say you can cut the tension in a room, that's not something that is necessarily seen, but that's certainly something that's felt. And yet we have these sayings and these phrases that literally let you know that feelings and the experience is both felt and sometimes seen. And yet we're so shocked when something disrupts this fantasy of an image that we have for either ourselves or the moment that we're in. And it really shouldn't be as shocking or upsetting.
But it is, because there is very much a difference in how you are interacting with the world, you know, and what I mean is that it's kind of like speaking. A lot of times people are like, oh, I'm super anxious about speaking to other people. No, you're just afraid that you can't control how they perceive what you're saying.
There's the fear.
That's pretty much what that is that you're afraid because you can't control how they see what you're saying to them. And that causes anxiety because you really need that control, because your biggest priority is how you see yourself, how you feel about yourself, and you're using everybody else to validate that. And that makes it impossible to talk to that person. To a person who is in that mentality, they are never really talking to you. They are talking to themselves via you, right? It's very different. And you can feel it, you know, as Amanda was just saying, you really can. You can feel the difference. And you can hear the difference in terms of conversation, because the conversation of when you're focused on how you are perceived by others never becomes vulnerable, right? Unless it's in a way that gets them to see you the way they want you to see you, right? If it's vulnerable, it's typically to get the attention rather than, hey, I'm working through something.
Right. I feel bad for me.
Right. Feel bad for me. But there is such a difference there because, again, you can't simply listen to the person talking to you being there, because you know that what they really want from you is for you to act a certain way. Mm-hmm. And a big part of, I guess, being aware of that is not catering to it, despite it making you the bad guy, you know, despite it making you being perceived as a bad guy, because it does. I mean, this is kind of the thing about when you find yourself going through thoughts in your head about how people perceive you. And there's two ways to have that experience. You can Go through it, and every thought about how you're perceived that is negative or makes you feel like less of a person, you can disregard, run from. It's their problem. There's no truth in that. It's all just stories. You can do that. And there's some degree of truth to that, in that it's never the truth of who you are. But that doesn't mean there isn't some truth about how you're acting and the impact that you have. So rather than taking all of those thoughts personally, which means you won't look at them, you'll run from them, you'll hide from them, you'll try to go to sleep to avoid them, right? You could look at them and go, oh, why is that person not engaging with me? Why is it every time I go up and I look for this response, they seem not to go for it? That way of doing it makes you, I guess, it puts you in a position where you can learn from all of these thoughts.
You're more
Like,
curious.
I think the bartender hates me, but I don't know that. Why do I think the bartender hates me? Well, because the bartender keeps giving me a dirty look. What am I doing when the bartender's giving me a dirty look? Oh, maybe I'm engaging with somebody where it looks suspicious, or maybe I'm doing this. It's not to say you are, but the willingness to look at it is what allows you to learn from it. But the flip side of that is, if you're not willing to look at it, that's what you got to watch for. Because if you're not willing to look at it, it's typically because it's true. It's typically because that's exactly what you're doing. So if you find yourself trying to engage with somebody out of need and they keep walking away, or they start resorting to shorter and shorter answers, the temptation there is to go, oh, well, they don't like me, they're judging me, they're all just making up stories about me, blah, blah, blah. Or what am I doing? And that's the difference. Remember, I know I've said it previously, but one of the hardest things I ever had to come to terms with in my life was the fact that I wasn't being honest with people, that I was acting out of need, that I was trying to get them to like me. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until that I started to listen to them, mm-hmm. that I started to actually be there with them rather than just trying to get something from them. But it really is a very thin line, mm-hmm. between thinking about yourself and not. And it's a practice. But it has to be important to you. It can't just be something you should do because then it makes you enlightened or a high consciousness person, or because it makes you any kind of person whatsoever. Because then the temptation is just to have what sounds like intellectual sounding conversations when it's really just masturbation.
Intellectual beating around the bush.
Straight up, and that was very much the point that I wanted to avoid over the weekend. Was I don't want to be thinking about the intellectual because it's unimportant. To me, what's important is the company that's with me right now, right? The experience that I'm having right now, mm-hmm. and the general lifting up of everybody who's here, because they're frankly here to lift me up, mm-hmm. in return. They came for my birthday. That was fucking awesome. So I just wanted to talk about this because it's not like this is the only time this comes up. It's not like, these are the only people who ever do this. I mean, we all do this to some degree. Absolutely. But it's so important to just recognize that you don't have to be able to, you don't have to look at your shit. You don't have to look at these influences under the surface. You don't have to. It's an option. You don't have to. But if you don't, you will be pushed and pulled by them. And if it offends you to think that there is something that you don't see that is influencing your decisions, that is an excellent reason to be very, very careful and to watch very, very closely.
Because there's always something there. And being willing to just look at that, be honest with yourself, be like, oh, there are things going on. There are things happening beyond my idea of what I think should be happening, beyond my idea of what I believe to be happening, and looking like how much you can focus on, thoughts, stories, like focus on ideas of shoulds and shouldn'ts based on, the experience that you're having in the moment. And that sort of feeling like, oh, just put a blanket, cover your eyes, as you're driving, as you're walking around. It's like, that doesn't help you face your experience. And it doesn't help you with your interactions. It doesn't help you with talking to people. It doesn't help you with living your life.
It helps no one. And
if that at all, not a single person, including yourself, because that feedback goes hand in hand with, physical feedback from yourself, like the experience of relaxation when we're not trying to be anything and just enjoying and experiencing and appreciating the experience that we're having. Like there's so much more potential there, as opposed to trying to, assume that you can know individually, what the best thing for you ever is. It's wild to assume that we know beyond where we're at, that something else, should or shouldn't be the case. And noticing, where people expect you to be a certain way, or expect you to be having a certain experience, or going through like, to assume outside of yourself of a should or a shouldn't. It's like, look at yourself. How are you doing? How much responsibility are you taking? How much of that sense of faith in yourself are you mitigating? And we do it via religion, we do it via structures, we do it via the right way. It's like the right way, quote unquote, to live isn't your way. It's not. And so to be able to continue to experience your way, there can't be, the sense of knowing. It's like, oh, this is the right way to live, this is the wrong way to live. It's like you're living as you. You're you. And anyone who assumes that you should be different or expects you to be different, like, it's not fair. But it is what it is also. What is fair?
I don't know, but I just asking myself how much responsibility is a dangerous question, because now you're trying to measure how much am I doing, and by asking how much am I doing, I'm already implying how much am I not doing. And so I don't even want to ask myself how much. What is happening right now is the question that I like to, that's my favorite question of the moment. What's happening right now, and what can I do? What is available right now? Not how much, how little, because that feels like it leads right to a judgment of me being more or less responsible than I should or shouldn't be. So fuck the how much is. What is happening right now feels like it's way more relevant. And when we think about feedback from our environment and from other people, it's not, is it right or wrong? Am I doing it incorrectly? Is this information useful? Or maybe I can rephrase that. How can I use the information that's being given to me right now in a way that makes sense? Not in a way that makes me feel better. If someone is telling me, Amanda, you're being a little abrasive, I'd be like, okay, well, how much running am I doing? Like, what's happening right now? Okay, I'm feeling a little tense. Okay, I'm feeling a little tense. Usually when I'm tense, I tend to run at high speed. If I'm running at high speed, I tend to be a little more abrupt. So if someone is telling me, Amanda, you're a little abrupt right now, instead of being, why are you so sensitive? Or that's a story. It's how can I use the information that someone in this moment is considering me abrasive? How can that information become useful? And that can usually turn itself back around to how tense am I and how relaxed am I? And if I am more tense, I tend to be more hurried in conversation and in action. And when I'm relaxed, I tend to be more easygoing, both in action and in conversation. So the feedback about me being abrupt means nothing about me, but that information can be useful because I made use of the information given to me, not because I took it personally.
Well, that's just it. I mean, you can take it in. I mean, it's not to say you're not going to rise and take it personally, but catch yourself. And then after the fact, go, okay, hold on. Am I vilifying this other person and trying desperately to come up with reasons that they said this to me? Or am I actually listening to what they said?
Yeah.
And that's very much the difference. There's that. And am I willing to hear what somebody says?
Yeah.
That says volumes. Volumes. If somebody's communicating to you that you are in fact not being genuine, right? Yeah. Or you are participating and enabling somebody who is not being genuine. A response of, well, I don't want to talk to you now. I don't want to come and hang out with you. It's like, well, that's not a friendship.
No.
Like, that's not a relationship. What you just said was that there is a very specific script that we are all following, and it's yours.
You're in control.
It's yours, and you're in control of the script. And there's a line where you no longer will listen to anything that's outside the script, and that again is super concerning.
That's a red flag.
You should be aware of that. And if it comes out of your lips, like, oh, this is too much, I can't have this conversation, I gotta go. You should be fucking concerned
that is your response. That you took feedback as a threat.
Exactly.
If you think that all feedback is a threat, that is very concerning, that you're so fragile.
Well, or
You know?
whatever you're protecting is fragile. I mean, that's really
That you
it.
feel
Whatever
fragile.
you're holding on to as your source of security and stability and all of
Mhm.
that, if one concern, someone's feedback, anything is all of a sudden viewed as a source of division, like you're
Mhm.
trying to tear this apart, it's already falling apart. Like you are aware of it, which is why you're so hypersensitive to it. Just let it go at that point. Like you're at this point, you're just circling the fucking drain.
Yeah, and how certain you feel about whatever it is you're holding on to. It's like it doesn't help you at all. Like it isn't there. It isn't actually giving you the support that you need. They're weights, all of those things. All of those.
Relationships shouldn't be weights, but people find solace
Yeah.
in like mutual weight.
It's like
You be there for my weight. I'll be there for your
and
weight.
we'll be mutual crutches. Can we be mutual crutches? And I won't walk and you won't walk and we'll drag ass together forever.
Yeah. And anybody who comes close to us will latch on to and ask for them to help carry us along.
And you're like, no.
And that right there is codependent toxicity in a nutshell.
Mm.
Yeah. And like the trade, like you're trading yourself every time. That experience, like even of having that certainty in relationships, moving past, dating into like marriage, and that idea that like, that's a massive guarantee or sense of
promise.
guarantee.
It's a promise.
That isn't the case. Like it feels like, we're going to guarantee something beyond today, together forever, blah, blah, blah. And if you focus on that, if that's you're trying to maintain that, like you're going to keep, like life keeps going like this, and you're trying to maintain a straight line through it. It's like you're going to experience a whole lot of consequence right there as you try and hold on to this straight line as you're going through life that is responding to you in a sense. There's a back and forth based on how much it's like my expectation, my idea, and life's going all like this, and then you're going like this, and life's like that. And it's like, how much are you getting in your own way by not looking past yourself?
Yeah.
By not realizing that everyone is going through some things. You don't know. You don't have a guarantee that like just because you're going through something that everyone else is like somehow doing better than you. It's like, no, you don't know how anything beyond your response will turn out. You don't have the ability to have some sort of guarantee based on that. But as you get feedback in the moment, if your response is anything but like, okay, noted, you're going to consider that, at least having some willingness to look at that instead of immediately turning it around and putting on the other person as them trying to get you to a certain spot, or them trying to have impact or influence on your life somehow, while they're just expressing how you're impacting their life. It's like, I'm going to avoid that and just assume that you're trying to control my life in some way. And
you must be, because you're not allowing me to do what I want.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love the question. Is it that you have an expectation of me? And it's like, oh, yes, to some degree. Absolutely. It's like, I invite you over for dinner. I do expect you to eat that dinner. Like there is a little bit of expectation
or
that
least,
feels, that feels more like, not that it had to happen, but
I guess
it's more likely
that.
to happen.
It's so funny because here's, I think, the point. I don't expect anybody to act in any way, shape, or form. I really don't. I don't expect somebody to come to an event and act in a certain way. But I get the choice. You see, that's the thing, is I don't expect it. I invite people. I'm like, hey, let's see if they're going to make the most out of this, or if they're going to fucking make it about them.
Yeah.
I don't expect anything, but I do watch. And when they do, I make a choice. And that's the point. It may not be personal, but that's the point. It's not personal. I get a choice. What do I want in my life? What do I not want in my life? That's it. That is all. It's not about expectation. I get a choice. I get a choice. I don't have to expect shit from you, but I don't need to tolerate it either. Right? It's a choice. You can do whatever you want with your life, and I get to say you don't get to do that with mine. That's not an expectation. That right there is a healthy goddamn boundary. And it is the reason that relationships can remain healthy. And it's because everybody has a free choice on whether or not they want to be there. That's why so many relationships don't work, is because they're based on attachment, not choice. The question is, would you still be with a certain person if you weren't afraid of being alone? Oh, isn't that a great question? How many times do we ask that question? I've asked myself that question a lot, to the point where in my 40s, 2 people aren't really a huge spot for me to get over. I have met more people than I remember. Right? That's the point. These people will eventually be a dim memory for me. Right? Because everybody else eventually becomes a dim memory.
Right.
Right?
And vice versa.
I keep that in mind. I'm not like, yeah, these 2 people are going to make my life better because they provide a support network and friends to fucking be there for me in the end. Like I said earlier in the episode, I don't need that shit. I don't need it. I don't want it. I certainly am not looking for it.
Yeah.
That's all. Friendship is a result of being yourself with people who accept that self. But if you are in there going, I don't feel like you all have to cater to that. Oh, there we go. Something happened with the microphone. Then the fact is that somebody's going to go, I don't want to cater to that. And you may say, that's not fair. It feels personal. But the fact is that it's not. It's not personal. It's a choice. It's a choice. Nobody's vilified here. Everybody that goes through these behaviors, everybody who, one way or another, whether it's focusing on themselves to the detriment of the relationship with other people around them in real time, or it's justifying that, whatever those behaviors might be, they're temporary behaviors. See, I know that. I'm aware of the fact that the people I interact with are going to continue to change. I'm not vilifying anybody by any means. My choice is whether or not I'm willing to sit through it while they do so. That's more or less it. And I don't think that I'm necessary for them to change. In fact, I think sometimes being absent is far better in terms of helping someone change.
Yeah.
Right? So I wish them well. I wish everyone I've ever said goodbye to well. There's no malice. Live your life. I wish you the best. I really do. It's just, I live my life. I love my life. And I'm not willing to sacrifice the quality of my life just for drama that I very clearly communicate isn't necessary. And I'm more than happy to sit through to a reasonable degree. But when it's fully communicated, like, yeah, you know what? I don't care how you feel. I'm not going to deal with it. Get over it. I don't want to talk to you about it. Obviously you're up to something. Obviously you're being judgmental. You're coming up to that's a hard line that frankly, I just don't need it. And a lot of us have gone through that. Could be with friends, could be with family, but it's important to recognize, like, if you're feeling that and then you're like, oh, but I don't know. Ask yourself how much of, oh, but I don't know comes from need. Ask yourself, because you're probably really young, and you could be like, well, I'm in my 50s. That's still pretty young. A year is a long fucking time. How much are you limiting your life? How many potential relationships are you stopping yourself from experiencing by holding on to ones that are toxic?
Yeah, because oftentimes that space, giving someone space, giving someone the opportunity to build faith in themselves. If someone is petrified of being alone and they're looking to you to fill that space, it's like you're taking that opportunity from their ability to exist and experience and live their life freely without so much sense of a should or a shouldn't, or what they believe should be happening or shouldn't be happening, or what people they're involved with in their life. Like that sense of knowing that something is best, that you have in this body of an experience that we're all cells in, that you have any guarantee of what should be happening. That is what creates this world where there's fucking chaos and war and I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're right, this, that, blah, blah, blah. It's all this fucking certainty that these cells in a body know what's best for the body. Like, instead of just realizing that it's already playing out, like there isn't, your guarantee versus someone else's. And then we fight, and we see that in moment-to-moment interactions. We see that in relationships. We see that in countries having a dispute and all the identities and religious wars. Like, these are all fought. These are all interactions based on this sense of control, this sense of guarantee, this sense of certainty that, no, I'm right. My perspective is correct. It's like, what the fuck? Do you really think that you're correct? Do you really think that your response to things, that the way you want things to go, the way you believe things should be happening, like, is actually correct? Like, the audacity and the arrogance to assume that you know with absolute guarantees is
arrogance or desperation.
Well,
Or a lack of creativity, right? A lack of being able to see the bridge that hasn't been built yet.
This has been a fun episode. We still have 3.5 minutes left, and then we're going to get on to the Patreon call afterwards. But I wanted to say again, so many lessons all the time. And anybody could have looked at it this weekend and went like, oh, it sucks. You know, it was supposed to be such a... And it was fantastic. There was
awesome.
nothing that sucked about this weekend. I really mean that sincerely to everybody who came. This was fucking amazing.
It was
and I mean that to everyone who came.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that relationships don't change in real time. Events aren't events. They are moment by moment interactions, and every moment changes your relationships with everyone. It's narrow-minded to think that, you know, over a certain weekend or a certain event or a certain specific celebration, it's like, you know, I guess a change-free zone. Like, we all go into it as we were. We all come out of it as we were. It's like, it's not how it works. Life is always changing. You know, but I had the best time. I appreciated everybody who sang. I appreciated everybody who came to so many great meals, walked around the waterfront, listened to Fidelium down by the waterfront in Mafia Park, and just had such a fantastic time. I got some comic books, dope t-shirts, and it was just, the well-wishing was fantastic. And so I really appreciated everybody to the depth that they could appreciate the weekend with me. It was magical. It really was. Regardless, again, of how things may change afterwards, I will never forget this weekend as being one of the best birthdays, if not the best birthday I've ever had in my life. So I just wanted to say that to everyone. It really was appreciated, and I'm glad that you came out. And I look forward to potentially seeing you again, if in fact I'm going to see you again.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing your birthday with us, Ray. It was epic and in spectacular fashion. I think celebrated you for being you. So thank you so much for being our friend and for being a co-adventure on this epic fucking journey we call life. And to all of you, thank you for sharing in your moments with us. Whether we get to talk with you directly or not, it doesn't matter. We're all still connected in this moment, and it means more than words ever need to convey.
It really is. It's exciting, the timing of things. You know, things are taking off. We got some advertising. We got some things going. We got a new podcast potential studio setup going here.
For the listener who didn't see what I just did, I just unveiled one of our new professional podcast microphones on its boom arm. It's very exciting. You couldn't see it, of course, because you're not watching this, but this will be set up in the very near future. We will have higher quality audio. It's going to be awesome.
Yes, great time. And yeah, the birthday weekend was awesome. It was incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was exciting, and the amount that we were able to get into that.
Oh my God, 4 nights of premium karaoke.
Great people.
Just want to say Bohemian Rhapsody as the whole place got into
Everyone.
It. Just an incredible moment.
Thank you, Dalil. I think Dalil came outside to get us. I was like, thank you.
Yeah, and if you don't follow Dalil on Instagram, I believe the real Dalil.
The real Dalil.
Absolutely. Follow that motherfucker. He is great. He's going to make big waves in his life. But, oh man, what a weekend. And then we were camping afterwards, which was fantastic. What a great way to tone down and just relax, get back into a pace of just being here. So, yeah, we are going to adjourn right now, take a small break, and then we'll be back on Patreon. Other than that, we're going to be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time for episode 37 of Season 6, which we will be recording live